So one of the best ways to keep events and the happenings of your church in front of your people is through a church newsletter. The problem is many churches do these wrong. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to give you 7 tips for effective newsletters.
Thanks for joining us again today on Practical Church Planting. Today we're going to be giving you 7 tips for more effective newsletters.
This is the high intense drama you've all been waiting for.
This is what ministry is, right?
But we see a lot of questions. I've seen it in the Practical Church Planting Facebook group, other Facebook groups. We've talked about various side notes on various episodes about newsletters. So today we're just going to give you all the things that you can do.
Everything you need to know.
Simple. You can do it, or you can do it apply all these today. And this is not even, sometimes you might hear an episode and some of the things you could do right away. Some of them take more work, but you could do all this and honestly does not take a lot of time. So if you have questions about newsletters, we think every church should send them. Now newsletters, we mean like an email that you send from your church to your people at your church.
Update of what's going on.
How do you do it in a way that people will open it and read it and all that sort of stuff?
Yep.
Here we go.
Good question.
Number 1, here's our advice. You should send them once a week, every week. So you should send one every week. Now, this is regardless of where you are on the church planting journey. So obviously if you're an existing church, but if you're a church plant, you should also do this. The more that you can stay in front of your people in a non-spammy way, the better. And nobody thinks a weekly email is spammy.
Yep.
Multiple weeks, it is spammy. If it's inconsistent, it's not really helpful. And so we would recommend you do send one every week, ideally on the same day, so people kind of know what to expect, but actually do it once a week. But the answer is, should I be sending one? The answer is absolutely yes. And we can talk about here in a second, what to include on that, but you should be sending one every single week.
So what would you say to, a church plant who hasn't planted yet, who's like, I don't really have updates every week. We're not meeting weekly. I don't know what to tell people on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so part of this goes to maybe our launch plan. So if you're new to planting, practicalplanting.com/launch, you can get our Growing Your Launch Team course. We highly recommend, once you not to really go public with it until you're about 6 to 9 months from the launch date. We recommend a shorter launch window, which you can learn all about that in the course. So this is part of that. So if you're 2 years away from launching,
you don't have many updates.
And there's just, on my and in probably both of our opinions, you're not launching yet.
Yeah.
What are you doing? So again, if you're 9 months or less from launching, there are things to update on. You could if you don't have a lot of stuff or a lot of events, you could talk about giving. You can share a story, something you're excited about, but say something, something that's going on, just to stay in front of your people. And there's probably a lot of things you want your people to know, and you can't send a super long email. People won't read it. So you could talk about a value and keep it short, here's a value, here's 3 sentences about it. But just something to keep in front of your people and to get into that rhythm of sending it every week. Because if you're inconsistent with it, the chance people open it or even less, and you lose a way to keep the happenings of your church in front of your people. So I would say start the habit now and send one every single week, but only send one.
Yeah, that's really good. I think we all want to assume that people think about the church as much as we do as the pastor or church planter or whatever, but it's just not the case. And so having something that you're keeping in front of them every week, it just kind of adds to. It's not like the one key that if you do this, then it'll solve everything. But it's like this plus being active on social media plus doing different things to engage people. It's just another way to engage people during the week that people appreciate. Honestly, if you're using it in an effective way, like we're going to list out. But it's something that can be done really effectively. But it's just another way to stay in front of people, let them know what's going on, and help them kind of remember your name outside of Sundays.
Yep. Nobody thinks once a week is spammy. More than once a week, you'll probably get more people to subscribe.
Yep.
Of course, if there's a major thing you need to remind people of, you can send another email. That should definitely be the exception, not the rule. Like with COVID stuff, or maybe you have some big event, you want to send some last minute details. That should be definitely the exception.
Yeah, and and to that point, if you have something that you need to send an exception, whether it's something like maybe a little bit negative news like COVID things, or something like really positive, if you're sending just sporadic emails, then it's hard to make one stand out from the others. Yeah. Or if you're doing a weekly, then you have something that's outside of the weekly. It's really easy to kind of make that its separate thing, and people will notice it a little bit more than if you're just kind of randomly send an email. Then this is just another random email, whether it's important or not.
Yeah. So once a week, we send ours out on Thursday. I don't know if that's the best day or not. People say different things. I like Thursday because it's closer to the Sunday coming up. Just reminds people, even if nothing the newsletter is about coming to church, it just reminds people that it's a thing.
Yep.
But once a week, every single week, you should definitely do that. And it should be it should be a habit. So I would encourage you not to be a thing that this is forget. Put it on your task list or on your calendar and do it every week. Number 2, the shorter the better.
Yes.
So
big one.
you all know this. We all know this. Like if you click on a blog post, which they're not as big as they used to be, you kind of like scroll down really quickly to see how long it's going to be before you read it.
Exactly.
This is what people do. And again, if you're inconsistent with your posting and you're really inconsistent with your length of your newsletter, people will just be trained to assume this is probably way too long. I don't want to read it. So you don't need to send a lot of stuff. It's just like if somebody sends you an email, even if it's from a company or your own business or whatever, you don't want to read something super long. And so if it's going to be super long, you're not going to read it. So what does this mean? Well, that might mean you don't say everything that's going on in the church. That's one thing. The things that are coming up, you got to figure out ways to do them super concisely. One way to reduce how much stuff you have in your newsletter is only put in your newsletter things that are relevant to the entire church or to the vast majority of the church.
Yeah.
So that's one way. Now, again, there's exceptions. Like if you have some random men's event, obviously you put that on there, but you don't need to send like the children's update and I don't know if you have a student ministry update. That's just not the place for. This is just the general. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like if parents have kids in elementary school, whatever, there's stuff they need to know. The kids department, whatever, will send stuff out or whatever, but it doesn't need to go to everybody. So it needs to be shorter. For us, we typically do, like if there was something we wanted to highlight from the past week, so maybe a video or something cool that happened, that'll be the first thing. And then like 3 or 4 events or things that are coming up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. Pretty much our newsletter is just updates. We don't really share a lot of anything else in that. So a couple things that are coming up, or if we don't have a lot of things coming up, maybe you could share a quick win or something cool that's happened, or just have a newsletter that's 200 words. Like nobody's going to complain.
No.
And again, they'll be trained like this is short, I'll read it. So again, for us, we organize it, and I'll talk maybe in a second how we do that. But it's like here are 3 or 4 things coming up. Here's something cool that happened, and that's it.
Yep. I mean, we can complain about, whatever. We have low attention spans and we want people to pay attention to our stuff more. But the reality of it is, and I mean, it's true for me too. Like I'm not going to read a super long email, especially if it's just like an update of what's going on that week. If it's like whatever we're trying to say, a thing that's like out of the blue or like a really special thing you're trying to highlight, that may be a little different, even though it's probably not, but that maybe can give a little bit more attention to. But if I'm getting the same email every week and every week it's long, man, whether I love them or not, like I'm not gonna. Maybe I won't unsubscribe just because I don't know if they can see that I unsubscribed. But like I'm not gonna read it, and so keep it short. And honestly, like most people are just gonna read the bullets. Like we know this, but we don't want to admit it. With blogs, anything, like there's reason that we do, X number of things for each episode, and that's what works because people
like lists.
They just want to see the highlights, and if they like the highlight, then they'll read further on. And so keep it short, keep it concise. And honestly, like none of us have so much going on that we have to give like super long extremely detailed messages about it. Keep it short, keep it concise. And if someone wants more information, they'll reach out. But honestly, if we're effective communicators, we can keep it pretty short and communicate everything we need to communicate. And
the newsletter too is not, if there's something that involves more detail, the newsletter is not the place to put anyway, because it'll make it super long. So you can say for more information, click here, have a link that goes to a landing page on your website.
Yeah, good point.
Like you have baptism coming up, talk about baptism coming up, if you got questions or want to get registered, click here. You don't have to explain what baptism is and why we do it. It's not the place for it. People actually want more information, they'll actually seek out more information, but this is just the highlights. So keep it shorter. I don't really know how many words ours are, but probably less than 500 words.
Yeah.
Definitely less than 500 words, actually. So shorter the better. Do it every week. Again, you're trying to get people to read it. And even if they don't read it every week, if they see what it is from time to time, they'll click on it because they know what to expect. We have this one successful business guy at our church who told me about a year ago. He said he really likes our newsletters, which I'm like, that's a weird thing to say. Like, who likes newsletters? But he said he appreciates them because they're short and to the point, and he knows what to expect, and he knows like if there's something coming up, it's going to be on there, so he can like put on his calendar or whatever accordingly. Yeah. So it's simple, easy. So once a week, shorter the better. Don't do a lot of information. If you got a specific thing you want to talk more about, there should be a link on your webpage. Click here for more information.
Yep.
Number 3, plain text. So this is something we've talked about in other episodes. These fancy pictures and these graphic styles and, fancy fonts. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do it. Number 1, as we've said before, it messes up load times and display. Mm-hmm. So mobile can look weird, or the desktop can look weird, or the iPad can look weird. And also, people like to read emails that look like normal emails. So when we email each other, it's just text. There's
Yep.
nothing fancy.
Yep.
So don't do that. Now, for us, for every once in a while, we might include like a picture. So a couple weeks ago, we partnered with a new church plant in North Carolina. Took a picture from Sunday, so that like just that picture was included in there.
Yeah.
Because stuff like that is worth seeing. But like a graphic for all of your events in the newsletter, that's not it. It needs to be plain text, easy to read. It's quicker to load that way. You don't have formatting problems, and it's easy to read through. So again, for us, here's how we set ours up. We might have 4 or 5 sections, quote unquote, where basically, because it's not fancy, I center the text, make it bold, and like I might say, if we're doing a canned food drive, it'll say canned food drive in bold, and then there'll be a few sentences below that about what the canned food drive is, or drop it off.
Yeah.
And then there'll be below that, there'll be another section. It'll just be a bold, like if we have baptisms coming up, which we do.
Yep.
Baptisms on whatever Sunday. Here's how you can get signed up if you got more information. And the next one will be, gosh, I don't know, something else that we have. Whatever. It's just
something.
all that is a bold and like 3 words or 3 or 4 words. What it is. If they want more information, they read it, or if they just scroll down to the next one, so you can get the highlights, and it's super quick. So plain text, and that's how we do it.
Yep, and I think we've all kind of been a part of, if you've supported like missionaries or something like that. And this is like what I thought at first in doing newsletters is, if you've ever like followed a missionary or something, there's always like tons of pictures and updates.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, I guess you can kind of make the argument either way, but it makes a little more sense because obviously they may be showing like how the family's growing, or the kind of context that they're in, because the people that are supporting them are not in there. And so when we first started here and helping out with newsletters and things like that, that was kind of the frame of reference I had of like, these are the updates that I've kind of used to seeing. So it would make sense for us to put a lot of pictures in. But as we kind of, as we've learned and kind of gone on, it just doesn't really, there's nothing that we're doing here that needs to be communicated in picture form that much. That's what we have things like social media and stuff for. But this is just a quick way to communicate information. So yeah, it messes up things like load times. It messes up the optimization for different screens. And it makes things a lot more complicated, where if you know that you're just going to be opening it, there's going to be plain text, you can read through it quick. You're going to get a lot more, a lot higher of an open rate if people kind of know what to expect. And so
and like these pictures and these fonts and these formatting means you have to scroll more. You could see the same thing without scrolling, or you have to scroll down. Of course, if you have to scroll down, they're less likely to do it.
Yep.
So just making it super easy to read. And one of the hard things about this, like a lot of things, is we just kind of do what we've seen. So for example, the missionaries, which pictures are fine, but again, a lot of missionaries aren't trained in communication. Or
exactly,
like if you grew up in church, and so you just do what you've seen without saying, hey, it's the best. Like pictures can be fine. Let's say you do a trunk or treat. That's a great thing to celebrate and show pictures of. What we've done in the past is, again, we use MailChimp, and there's a way to like do groups of 4 photos, so they're not like big photos stacked on top of each other where you have to scroll down. So we'll include a couple of photos, and we'll do a link like click here on Instagram or Facebook, and you can see all of them. That's a way to make them concise, or maybe you can put it at the bottom of the email, so it's not hard to scroll through. So the thing to ask is, okay, I've seen it done this way, but is it the best way? What we do, or what I do sometimes, especially if I'm looking at stuff like YouTube, we completely redone our YouTube channel this year. What I did was I looked up churches that do well at these sort of things and see how they do it and emulate them, and then you can tweak it. But don't just assume, because you've always seen it a certain way, that it should be a way. And so I think newsletters is one of those. You've seen, especially in the mid 2000s and all that, when email became a thing, these like fancy things, so everyone just did it. And all of the newsletters, so I have a newsletter that I do. I only follow one other newsletter because I'd like to keep my inbox at 0. But the ones that I'll follow it, like sometimes you have to get something free. So you have to send it your email, so I'll do that before I subscribe. And the ones that are really good, it's just text. It's just text. The really big ones are text only. They're not really fancy, so it's something that we should do as well.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're trying to figure out, if you like, I've never seen a good example of it, you can make a fake email account and subscribe to churches that you think do this well. I mean, newcityrdu.com is our website. You can subscribe to ours and then unsubscribe once you see it once or twice. But other people do it. I mean, obviously, we're not pioneers in this. Other people do it the exact same way. So see what other people are doing that you think are going to be doing it well, not just like a church that you have no idea about. But it's pretty much just, that's what most things in church are. It's just finding someone who's doing it really well and emulating as much as possible and adapting to your own context.
So the shorter the better, once a week, and plain text. Number 4, space out the text. So this is another thing you can do. Writing an email and digital content is not like a book where you can do 4 or 5 sentences in a paragraph. You need to do maybe 3 sentences at most, and then you need to break it up, like do a space between them, because text, that's a lot together, especially on a digital screen, and an email on your phone, it's even condensed even more. It can make it look if it's all one big paragraph block, like if you have, for example, 6 sentences in one block, that's a lot of scrolling.
Yeah.
People, and your just mind, I've seen stuff on this too. Like your mind thinks there's more words are than there is, and you're just more likely to not. So space it out. So again, I'm not saying ours is the best, but how we do it is we'll have a bold, just normal size text, 12 font, whatever the font is on MailChimp default. I don't know. And canned food drive, 2 or 3 sentences. If we got something that maybe takes 4 or 5 sentences to explain, it will be spaced out. Like there'll be a space between the first 2 sentences and the next 2, so that it doesn't look all together. And so space it out. Or if you have, you can even go another way. So how I do it with my personal newsletter that I send out is, so I do this thing once. I'll just explain it because it might be helpful. So it's like 2 quotes from others, 2 ideas from me, a random fact, and a question. DylanDawson.com if you want to get it.
It's pretty good.
And thank you. And what I even found was, so when I did 2 quotes from others, and that was its own section, on the email, so on my website it was fine, but on the email, it looks like the text is close, even if I space it out. So I would double space it. So like the first quote, then I would double space it before the second quote. Or the 2 ideas from me, I do my idea, then I double space it. So it gives it even more room to space out. So all that to say, play with it, look at your own email inbox and see what it looks like. And if it just looks like it could use more spaces, or maybe between your sections, you could double space it instead of single space it. Whatever you need to do, there's no standard. You have to do it this way. Look at it and say, what is the easiest way to read this? And if it looks like it's too bunched up, maybe based on your email provider, maybe you need a double space from certain things instead of single space because it's too close. Do whatever you can, minimal text, but spaced out text so that it looks like it's easy for your, I don't know, it's easy to break up and read it quicker, even if it's all together and it's the same amount of content or words.
Yeah.
It just looks like a lot more. So space it out.
Yeah, I remember recently I was reading on like a comment thread on Facebook. I don't remember what it was. People were arguing about something, and who knew? One of the responses was just a gigantic chunk of text.
Yes.
And the other guy who he was arguing with, the response back to him was basically just like, that's a giant wall of text.
Yep.
And didn't even say anything back. And then the guy responded like, oh, I didn't realize, we weren't educated enough to like whatever. And it's like, like it's good to obviously read, but this isn't the format in which I'm trying to read a large chunk of something, in my email or on Facebook, whatever. And so like, I don't know. I think that like we can try and, I don't know, whatever. But like people want it to be spaced out. People want it to be quick and easy to read. We're not trying to make that some, in-depth thing where people need to spend a lot of time reading it, and so it should only take you a couple minutes to read a email. And whether or not it's the same amount of content, if it's all bunched up, it just looks like a lot. And honestly, it looks to me, when I see that, it's not that it looks like intimidating to read, it just looks like you're rambling. Like it looks like you just kind of put a bunch of thoughts together, and I don't think it's worth taking the time to read.
And it's easy to get lost too.
It's easy to get
lost. I love the Facebook example because all of us have seen the comment threads where someone's going back and forth and maybe you're interested in it and someone does like the 1 paragraph, 30 lines, and we don't read it.
Yeah, it's like, well, I guess I'm done.
Because if that same person had done the same thing, now Facebook's tricky because you have to hit Shift Enter. Because if you just hit Enter, it posts. So not everyone knows that. But you know this. Go on Facebook today and just look at some comment thread. Probably won't take you hard to find. The people that know how to space out their sentences, you will read. The one that's just one giant chunk, your mind just says nope.
Yep.
So that's exactly the same thoughts going to the email.
And I think it goes back to like what people are expecting. If someone's reading an article, obviously, I mean, honestly, there's still an argument for like spacing things out, but they're expecting to see a chunk of text. Like they're expecting to read something long. If they're just opening up an email that in their mind is just going to be updates from the coming week, they're not expecting a giant chunk of text. So that's where they kind of disconnect.
But even in that, most articles, websites, news sources, if you go read an article, it's 2 or 3 sentences, maybe 4 sentences. And then space it out.
And then space it out.
Very few are just big, massive paragraphs.
That's true.
On digital. So just make sure it's spaced out so that people don't automatically in their mind think, I'm not going to read that.
Yep.
Number 5, only include events happening within a few weeks. So this is another problem. It's like, let me tell you the next 3 months that are happening. First of all, people ain't going to remember that.
Nope. And
it makes it too much information. Now, there can be exceptions. If you have a big event coming up, but if you have a big event coming up, saying it in your email every single month, every single week isn't helpful. So I don't know. Let's say you're going to do a trunk or treat since we're coming up in the fall and it's 2 months away. I wouldn't put it in my weekly email every week because people are just going to tune it out.
Yep.
Now that I might put it in sooner rather than later. So for us, it's typically 3 weeks. We don't typically put an event in the newsletter if it's over 3 weeks, but trunk or treat, we might do a month, or your Christmas Eve, if you do that differently, we'll do that from the beginning of December because you want people to plan.
Yeah.
So there are exceptions, but generally speaking, don't do things more than a few weeks out because it's too far out and it adds too much and people aren't going to remember anyway. And it's a really easy way to reduce what you have. Now, you might also say, well, we don't have a lot of stuff upcoming. This is a great way to, again, you could say, here's one of our values and let me tell you a few sentences about it. Or here's an email I received recently and here's, share a cool win that somebody told you or something like that, or maybe a note of encouragement. But only do a few events. We would say less than a month away because it's too far away. People don't remember it, and it just can be too much information, too much text.
Yeah, I get that. Like in the very beginning, like you said, and early on, especially before you launch, you may not have a lot of things going on, so it can be tempting to try and include more things. But especially like once you launch and things are going on, I would always err on the side of yes, we need to keep people informed. We want to let people know what's going on, but the less, the better. Like if you have 10 things, I mean, if you have a large amount of things coming up, I would even say you may not even include every single one in the newsletter. Like if you're saying on newsletter and there's just this coming up, this, like I'm not going to remember all that. I'm obviously not going to take time to add each one of those to my calendar, and it's just going to be kind of white noise to me. And so pare down what you're sending out, and that may mean sending out less things or less, shorter time frame or only the next couple weeks, like we're saying. But if you're trying to include too much, it's just going to be real. I don't know. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. For
and I think this also helps people be trained to read it. So if you read ours, this is not an episode about how our newsletter is amazing. It's not. It's just things we've learned.
Well, the funny thing is, an amazing newsletter is the least amazing newsletter. Like ours is good because it's plain and simple. Like,
but I think one of the things that helps us is people know if I open this, it's going to tell me what's coming up. I'm not going to be reading stuff that's 6 months from now, so I'm going to forget. So why even read it?
Yep.
And so and people, I mean, more people than not are not going to open up your newsletter anyway. But you just want them to know if they happen to know it. This all comes down to expectations. Do they know what they're getting into or not? And if your length is varied widely and your format is all over the place and you're sharing, sometimes you share way too much, sometimes not enough, people don't know what to expect, the likelihood of them reading it is a lot less. But one of the ways to make not too much is only include, again, events happening within a few weeks because people aren't going to remember anyway. And you might feel like, I don't have a lot to say. Again, nobody, that's fine.
Yep.
It's like it's better to preach for 25 minutes than 50 minutes.
Yep.
Unless you're really, really good. But in an American context, typically speaking, you shouldn't preach for 50 minutes. We would not recommend it.
Yep.
So only if you include a few events and things happening within the next couple of weeks. And like you were saying, if you have a lot of random stuff, the best way to filter it is, does this apply to, some churches do it differently, maybe 80% or over half of our congregation. Now, there might be exceptions, like you have a men's event, you want people to know about it. At most 80%. Remember? Yeah. So, but if you've got stuff that's something for kids or students in college, and it's just a lot of stuff, well, that might not be the best place for it. And just the stuff that, and you might, or I was trying to think as I was talking here, or for example, they could participate in it. So if we do a canned food drive, well, 80% of our church probably is not going to buy it, but they have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you're going to do like some marriage conference or some random weekend retreat, 80% of your church probably is not going to go to it, but at least they have the option to do it. But if you're telling them all this stuff that has nothing to do with them, then they're going to tune out.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Only include a few events happening within a few weeks. Number 6, we mentioned this in other episodes, but send it from the pastor's email. So if you would recommend a MailChimp or I think ConvertKit is one, but I think that one costs money. We wouldn't recommend doing it through your personal email and making your own group, because to add people, then people also don't have an opportunity to unsubscribe, and that happens to me sometimes where I get these emails from these ministries or whatever, and they're from somebody's email and there's nowhere to unsubscribe. And it's so annoying. So you can either hit spam and report, or you can ask someone to unsubscribe when you feel like a jerk to do it. So that's
spam and report. That's what I do.
You should get people to place on, because it just makes you look like a jerk.
Yes.
But anyway, that being said, you can say what email it's from. So for us, it comes from my email. And the cool thing about MailChimp is it's obviously sent through MailChimp. But if you reply to the email, it also comes to me.
Yeah, that is cool.
So I see it. And I think a lot of churches default by putting info or the generic one. And that there's no reason, especially if you're a smaller church, to do that. And if you're a larger church, you should have someone on staff that's in charge of your communications. It just looks a lot better to see it's coming from somebody. Nobody's like tricked. Like people that know email stuff know that it's not coming from my personal email.
And they don't care.
But nobody cares.
Your personal email. Yeah.
It looks a lot better to say it's coming from a person than it's coming from a generic thing, especially in a church context, because people feel like, are you more important? You can't write me an email.
Especially in a small church context too, like church plant context. Like we're not, especially if you've recently launched and you have a launch team or whatever, or people that are serving, people know the leadership. Like you're not I don't know if this is the intention, but you're not fooling anybody and thinking that like it's not you sending it out.
Right.
And you want people to know it's you sending it out. Like you want to have as much contact with people as possible as the pastor. And obviously you can't have constant contact with everybody.
Yeah.
But it helps you be able to or helps people kind of see it as like a touch point from you to them each week, and they get to see your name. And not that like it's meant to like glorify or put you on a pedestal, but it just helps you personally be in communication with people rather than just this kind of entity.
So we, especially smaller churches, highly recommend it's from the pastor. But if you have somebody helping you out with it, that's fine. Put it from their email.
Oh yeah, totally.
Church. It should be from a church email though, not from like, let's say somebody's helping you and they've got their gmail.com and you have a church email. People can get confused by that. So make sure it's from the church email, but make sure it's from a person's email. So it looks like it's from a person, which will also help your open rates.
Yep.
So get out of here with those infos, dot whatever, or hello, or whatever, at whatever.
Yeah, people want to know who they're hearing from. And that's a good point. Whether it's you or someone else, whoever's sending it out, it should be from that person.
Yep.
You know, and people want to know who they're hearing from. So,
so
let them know.
Send it from the pastor's email. And then last but not least, this is a trick that we haven't started yet, but we're starting it this week at New Cities.
Oh.
And that is to add an engaging PS at the end.
I love PSs.
I haven't done it at New Cities because I'm a big fan of like random facts.
Yeah.
And we put a random fact in our bathroom every week, like on our little upcoming events. So it's like, I can't do that. And we also,
That's what I was hoping it would be.
so yeah, I'm not going to do that.
That's what I look for.
What we're going to do is Bible jokes, like cheesy Bible jokes.
Okay, that's good.
Now here's where this came from. So
I'll take
the only newsletter that I follow is James Clear, his 321 email. Obviously mine, I get my own to make sure it works normal. But
Read it for good ideas.
Here's where I first got this idea. Yeah, what did I say? He has, so this is a great example. I very rarely read his entire newsletter. I open it every week and I might read, because he does 3 ideas, 2 quotes, 1 something. So this is a little bit longer than mine. And so sometimes I'll skim it or I'll read a couple of them.
Yeah.
But without fail. And sometimes I just go straight to the bottom. Every single week, I go to the bottom of his email. It says PS, and it has some like text or whatever. And you click on it, and it's always a hilarious tweet. I don't know where he finds them. Sometimes they're like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like a website you go to find funny tweets or whatever. And so he gets a guaranteed open from me every week. And I at least scroll down to get the PS. The nice thing about the bottom is you have to scroll down so you might see something that you want.
Yep.
So we haven't done it at New City because I wasn't sure, but this week we're going to start doing Bible jokes.
I like that.
Cheesy,
That's cool.
like cheesy Bible jokes.
Yeah.
Because it's just funny. Or this is my recommendation. So my wife works from Awesome Marriage. You do some stuff for them as well. They just started a monthly newsletter, weekly one. I was like, you need to do, Dr. Kim, this ministry called Awesome Marriage. Actually, it's a great thing to look at. So people at your church, check out awesomemarriage.com. They do a lot of free stuff. And Dr. Kim, who's the one who started, is like in his 70s as a marriage counselor, and they do a bunch of online stuff. I was like, you should do like funny things from him or bloopers or whatever. And so people just get trained to scroll to the bottom. So, and also if you put PS, like we're just used to, you have to read the PS.
Yep.
You cannot not read a PS. So PS, and it could be whatever. If you have, I would not recommend a Bible verse, or it needs to be something like funny that make people actually want to do it.
Lighthearted.
So if your church does something funny online, or you found something funny, or you have a joke, like or a random facts work. Like I said, we do random facts. But this could be a way to people like, I don't really know care to read this, but I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. So add an engaging PS at the end. People will read it more than they would otherwise.
I'm glad we're starting to do that. So one of the few things I subscribe to is a news source called The New Paper. It's an email like news, and it used to be I don't know if it used to be daily, and it would just once a day. It'd be like each news headline would have one sentence, and one of the words would be linked where you can click for the article. But it's just like bulleted. It was super quick to read. But they recently changed it to where like the free version is now once a week. So you get like a longer email once a week, but it's still all the same thing. It was just stuff that's happened this week. But at the end of each email of the daily emails, they had this thing called Brain Candy, and it said PS, and it was like said like a little sentence what it was, and one of the links was highlighted, and it was always just a funny video that was like posted online that week that they found like from Instagram or Reddit or something, or like something cool that like a cool new picture of space or something like that. But it was always like no matter what, like I love their emails. But no matter what, I was like, even if I don't have time to read it, I'm just going to go to the bottom and see what it is, because you always want to see the kind of lighthearted thing. It's fun.
Yeah, and if you can find random videos, obviously they need to be tasteful and appropriate.
Yeah, it might be.
But-
If I was doing it, I wouldn't do video things. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm sure they have a staff doing it, but
But yeah, do a PS at the end again. And if you're doing this every week, people would be trained to know something's going to be interesting.
totally.
In there.
Yep.
It needs to be funny, lighthearted, not serious, not a Bible study like we do. For example, we do on YouTube and whatever we do Bible in a minute. That does not need to be it because that's just not fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to click that.
Yeah. Right.
But every week I click his little tweet thing and it makes me laugh. I don't know where he finds them.
Yeah.
But he gets guaranteed
funny.
not only just an open, but I'm scrolling to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want people to open it. We want people to scroll down. And if you kind of do it this way with just a couple of words highlighting, each thing and then a couple sentences below each one, people might not read all the sentences, but they'll read the highlighted point. And so something that's relevant to them, they might want to know about. That's a way to get people to do that. So an engaging PS at the end.
Oh, that's a good tip. That's one of the best tips of the day.
PS, that's what you get for coming at the
that's
end.
right.
You get the PS,
There you
PS at the end. So that's 7 tips for more effective newsletters. I think this is one of the shorter episodes we've done in a while.
Yeah.
But highly practical. Again, absolutely do newsletters. Ours is not anything special, but if you want a template, you can send us an email or practicalplanning.com or practicalplanning.com. That's just resources. I'm in the Facebook page. You can ask for it. We can send you our latest one, and you can copy it and change it, do whatever you want to do. But those are 7 tips for more effective newsletters. If this is helpful, be sure to join the Practical Planting group on Facebook.
That's right.
And if you're in the church planting phase, get our Growing Your Launch Team course. We'll give you a workable step-by-step plan of how to actually grow your launch team and what to do. So be sure to check that out at practicalplanting.com/launch. And thanks for being with us. We'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting.